Alright, so welcome back to another review. This time we're looking at the ZMF Auteur. For those of you who are unaware, these are a ZMF headphone, and ZMF makes some very quality headphones. They are definitely a boutique product for the highest end of audiophiles out there. I mean, look at these beautiful cups. Look at the design. These headphones are clearly made for individuals that are not only passionate about their music, but what they're wearing on their head. And I mean, this just screams quality and beauty and elegance. So finally, after looking at these beauties online for so long, I was finally able to purchase a pair for myself and for the channel. But do these stack up against the competition? Are they really HD600 owners endgame? Well, let's find out. Now, before we do begin, I'd like to get this off my chest. Thank you very much for being patient with me. I know these past few weeks have been kind of on and off as far as the content's concerned, but I've had quite a lot on my plate, and I was pretty much able to just upload like every other week. And last week I had a lot of things stack up near the very end of what I was doing, but now we're over that. And it's back. I am back to the channel. Weekly content once again. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's jump into the review here. So as far as the contents are concerned, since I bought these pre-owned, I'll just go through them as per ZMF's website. You get the Auteurs in whatever configuration you got them in. These are the teak wood cups with black coated grills, yokes, and the stock headband. A ZMF stock braided cable, which I most definitely did not receive. I received a short ZMF OFC cable with the amp termination ending in a 3.5mm tip ring sleeve plug. I also got this short 1/4" cable from who knows where, as it lacks any sort of branding on it. It just, I mean, if that's a brand, doesn't look like a brand to me. A pair of ZMF perforated Auteur pads. These are not those, by the way. These are the Icon perforated lambskin pads. The owner's card, which I did not receive, thank you. And the lifetime driver warranty, which I also did not receive. So now let's talk about the build quality of these. The build quality of these is absolutely premium and elegant. The majority of the chassis is metal, with the top of the headband featuring a leather cover on the outside and a metallic strip within the inside that can be adjusted based on your clamp and comfort needs. Like I'm squeezing it right now, that's the metal in there, and I can feel it, that it's flexible, but it's flexible, but it's solid. Now the cups themselves, I mentioned it before, they look absolutely beautiful. Their polish gives off a bit of a reflection, which easily makes these the most artistically beautiful headphones I have ever seen. I mean, these transcend functionality. These are beauty. As opposed to the HD800's industrial futuristic type of beauty, these exude a more powerful elegance to them. Now the pads themselves are not memory foam, but they are very squishy and very plush too. The headphones themselves utilize the dual 3-pin mini XLR connectors, just like those found on Odyssey's headphones. Now let's talk about the comfort, and this is where things start to take a bit of a dark turn.
Walt, I don't know, man. You've been seeming sus lately.
Now that's typically how it goes from what I've seen. The better the build quality, the less comfortable they get. It's like the more you get, the more you have to give in return.
You sussy baka.
Now you put them on. At first, they feel just fine. They don't pinch your ears and they don't feel particularly heavy either. By the way, they weigh approximately 470 grams. So I followed ZMF's tutorial on YouTube to adjust the shape of the headband to fit my head. Now I felt these lacked a lot of clamp force, but after those adjustments, they felt about as good as they can get before clamping too hard. Yes, you can see this particular shape that this headband forms because this is the shape I gave it. So this pretty much maximizes clamp force while trying its best to minimize the amount of hot spot produced at the top. Unfortunately, there's no way I can look down with these. I mean, even after those clamp force adjustments, they're just gonna slide off your head very easily. So here's the problem I have with that. Because of their angled pads, as you can see there, because of their angled pads, the Cubs want to angle themselves forward and apply most of their pressure at the front. They end up placing most of that pressure on my cheekbones and on my glasses, which in turn makes my glasses place pressure on the bridge of my nose. So for a short listening session at my desk with no head movement whatsoever, they're good enough. They really are. Anything longer than that proves to be a real coin flip, depending on how tired or beat up you feel at the end of the day. After a good hour or so has passed, I do start to feel a bit of a hot spot at the top of my head. And yes, I know Zach discussed how to reduce the hot spots in the headband adjustment video, but if I follow that, these headphones will lose clamp, bringing me to square one, and such is life. Now, as far as amplification is concerned here, on the iFi IDSD Signature, I run them at about 10:30 AM on normal gain, and at around 11 AM on eco gain. On the THX AAA 789, I run them at 1 PM on gain 2, and at 10:30 AM on gain 3. So clearly these are quite power hungry, with an impedance level of 300 ohms and a sensitivity level of 97 decibels per megawatt. It's no surprise. It's really no surprise. And now, let's approach the sound quality. So as usual, the following tests will be performed without the use of any EQ whatsoever and will be conducted through a solid-state DAC amp. We will discuss sound-altering things such as the iFi's X-Bass and the Dark Voice tube amp capabilities in the notes and observations portion of this review. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. So let's begin at the bass as usual. The bass response as a whole is very neutral with a slight warmish tilt to it. Unlike in cases like the HD600 where a bit of a hump lies around the mid bass, these possess that warmth across the entire portion of the bass. Make no mistake, they're not as warm as that hump in the HD600 though. These reach into the sub-bass surprisingly well. They do experience a bit of a roll-off, which is typical of dynamic drivers, but their extension compensates for this well enough. And yes, I know these are biocellulose drivers, so I was just mentioning they're like dynamic drivers. It's a similar effect as the Sennheiser HD560S, where there's plenty of extension, but it's not extremely forward, so it never gets in the way of any other part of the frequency response. So here's an example for you. Helena Beat by Foster the People. The drums at the intro sound very matter of fact. They're clean and articulate with a good amount of body and a slight amount of rumble on those deeper drum notes, though it is far from being huge in any sense of the word. Not lacking, but not the main article either. Now, bass guitars possess a good amount of warmth and good presence, though it's not the most level of detail and intricacy I've heard from a headphone at this price point. I like the level of accuracy and wooliness these possess. It's like a great ratio between, it's like we're gonna give you that chunk for entertainment purposes, but we're going to keep it clean and smooth for audiophile purposes. And they just combine and make this, this awesome best of both worlds combination. It's great. It really is. Now let's talk about the mids here. I actually really appreciate the vocals on these. The vocals are very neutral and might just lean a bit teensy south of neutral in terms of forwardness. So in Dream On by Postmodern Jukebox, female vocals tend to sound forward and a bit strident at times. That's kind of the norm for the song. On the Auteur, they're just forward enough so that they stand apart from the instruments, but not so forward that they cause fatigue. Now, as far as the instruments within the mid-range lie, they're good, but not great. I mean, I still enjoy the music and I can clearly distinguish each instrument, but they lack a bit of depth here. It's not that they lack detail, they feel a little 2D. They lack a little bit of life and presence, probably due to the width and imaging. More on that later, by the way. Now let's talk about the treble. The treble as a whole is close to neutral. The majority of it can be considered neutral, and the peaks within it can be considered ever so slightly bright. So it kind of balances out that way. Now the entire response is a slight sizzle to it that allows details to come through without introducing any sort of sibilance that may be considered too much. I say it's right at the limit of where I'd consider it to be acceptable. No more, no less. Now let's talk about the soundstage and imaging. Soundstage is about average in terms of width. Its shape is kind of like a narrow chasm. Not that it stops it from sounding ample, you put these on your head and the soundstage sounds like this. Like here's your ear and then all of this inner space is the soundstage. But it's not very tall. You see this? It's not very tall. It's like a pill-shaped soundstage. Now, despite that, to me, I think it's the perfect width. Any wider and it would fall under the like super wide headphone category, you know, where it's kind of that niche, you know. But any narrower and it would face the pros and cons of headphones like the HD600, where it's like, well, it's intimate, but it's not wide because, and pros and cons, blah, blah, blah. Now the imaging on these though, my goodness, it is something. It's very easy to track a sound and point out where it's at. Because of that chasm-like soundstage, it sounds a tad strange at first. Give it a couple of minutes though, and you'll quickly adjust. So let's talk about some notes and observations here. First and foremost, running these through the dark voice, a tube amplifier, brightens up the treble and introduces a slight more sizzle. Personally, I found the treble on these to be very near perfection already, so these adjustments were unnecessary in my opinion. Could just be those stock tubes on the dark voice, but that's precisely what makes the tube amp portion of the review extremely situational and subjective. Now, as far as the X-Bass toggle on the signature is concerned, oh my, we found another game changer. It's, whoa. The effect the device has on the sound is less pronounced than on the Arias, but it's still a huge benefit for certain tracks. Unlike the Arias though, I feel the effect extended a little less into the sub-bass and a little more into the mid-bass, the result of which is that you'd probably be a little more coerced to turn off the X-Bass functionality on tracks which suffer from the feature. Still though, I found the extra bass to be mostly beneficial in electronic tracks and about neutral in disco tracks. You know, you can opt for it. Make no mistake though, sometimes the boost actually got to be a bit too much here, even in tracks where it should have been beneficial. It's just that it shows you how capable these drivers are, and then when you pair them up with something that gives it that extra bass boost, it goes balls to the wall. Not in terms of dirtiness, but in terms of even a bass head would say, okay, you know what, this is too much. So you got to be a little more selective if you choose to pair it with one of the hi-fi products that have the bass boost functionality. And so we get to the conclusion. The ZMF Auteur are an absolute joy to have around, for sure, but there are flaws to them that cannot be ignored. I'm really disappointed in that comfort aspect. I tend to see this often in headphones with very thick pads. The distance between your head and where the majority of the weight lies becomes greater with thicker pads, resulting in situations like these. I mean, I've seen this in, the Odyssey line, for example, the LCD2Cs I reviewed on the channel. I experienced it with the AudioTechnica M40Xs when I decided to buy the ZMF cowhide pads for it, as recommended by Mios, and a few other headphones that just have very, very thick pads and end up pushing the headphone far away from your head. Now, I'm not sure whether ordering a ZMF Pilot or Copilot pad will improve things, especially considering the very little extra space the yokes and headband can grant me. By the way, this is what I need to have them at for them to fit me on my head. And yes, I've played around with the configurations, nothing else works. It's pretty much this. This right here is one below the maximum, just an FYI. Now, I do plan on comparing these to many of the headphones I have here, including the HD800 line, the Arias, the HD600, of course, and the Focal LX. So in the interim, I'll be sure to look into ways to improve the comfort/fit of these, because I really want to keep them. They're so nice and they're so beautiful. But the comfort, it's like the LX. It's just like what happened with the LX, but I'm going to leave it at that. You know, you can find out the rest of it in the LX review. Now, I do have one final note on the sound these offer. It is absolutely excellent, and I feel it doesn't lack in anything as a whole. But is this the sound of a $1,600 headphone? No, it really isn't. Look, based on sound alone, these would be around $1,000 in price. But where do those extra $600 go? Well, these are a beauty. Yeah, they are a beauty. Well, these are a boutique product that are not only a functional piece of audio equipment, but a true work of art. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous and are nothing short of an item to brag about. This is bragging rights right here. You put these on a stand in your office and they just steal the show. So do consider that when purchasing these. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching this review. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You know the Patreon down below. Use my links if you want to go ahead and buy anything mentioned on this review. It really helps the channel out. And yeah, that's enough shilling for one day. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next review.